Using a diagram, explain why the provision of healthcare in an economy is likely to require government intervention. This question deals with the economic theory of market failure. Market failure occurs when resources aren't allocated in an optimal manner in an economy. Governments usually intervene when a market fails in order to eliminate the market failure. The provision of healthcare in an economy is likely to require government intervention because healthcare is an example of a merit good. A merit good is a good that would be underprovided and therefore underconsumed in a free market. Merit goods are goods that provide positive benefits for the consumers and for society in general. The consumption of healthcare also provides a positive externality. Positive externalities of consumption occur when the consumption of a good or service provides external benefits for third parties. The consumption of healthcare provides benefits to society because as people become healthier, the spread of infectious diseases will decrease, meaning society as a whole benefits. In a free market for healthcare, people will consume Q1 at a price of P1. At this point on the graph, marginal social cost equals marginal private benefit. However, the socially optimal level of consumption would be at Q star, where marginal social benefit equals marginal social cost. There is a potential welfare gain, denoted by the green triangle. If consumption of healthcare increases from Q1 to Q star, then welfare in society will increase. Because the government wants to maximise social welfare, then they will want to increase consumption of healthcare so that marginal social benefit equals marginal social cost. In order to increase consumption, the government has to intervene in one way or another. Part 2. Using diagrams, explain how airplane flights may either create a negative externality of production or a negative externality of consumption. Negative externalities occur when either the production or consumption of a good adversely affects a third party. This includes airplane flights, because the consumption of airplane flights can negatively affect a society. For example, if an airport is located in close proximity to a highly populated area, then the people who live in that area will experience the noise pollution from the airplanes that take off and land at this airport. The old Kai Tak Airport in Hong Kong is a perfect example of this. The airport was located in the middle of a densely populated area of Hong Kong. The flight path of airplanes landing at Kai Tak took them directly over areas of housing. The people living in that area were subjected to the noise pollution that an airplane causes. Airplanes also emit a lot of CO2 into the atmosphere whilst flying, which affects the environment. The air quality will decrease due to the amount of CO2 emitted from each airplane, and this will lead to higher rates of respiratory diseases for people who have to breathe that air in. This means that people's health is affected by the use of airplanes by travellers. The travellers in question aren't intentionally harming the environment, it is just a side effect of consuming the convenient air travel at their disposal. Therefore, the use of airplane flights by travellers is a negative externality of consumption. This can be shown using an externality diagram. As the diagram shows, at price P star, the marginal private cost is below the marginal social cost. There is an extra cost to society caused by the pollution from airplanes. The airliners will only be concerned with private cost and will produce at Q star. The socially optimal efficient output is at Q1, where MSC equals MSB. There is a misallocation of society's resources. Too many flights are being produced at too low a price. The welfare loss to society of Q star minus Q1 is denoted by the green triangle. This shows that the use of air flights causes a negative externality of consumption. Finally, discuss the view that government policies are the best way to reduce market failure caused by airplane flights. The market failure caused by airplane flights can be reduced with the implementation of government policy. A government can set taxes on airplane flights in order to decrease the demand for them. By doing this, the demand curve for airplane flights will shift to the left and less flights will be demanded at each price because the cost of production for producers has increased. The government will receive greater revenue from the tax and can use this to reduce externalities for society. Another way to reduce the market failure caused by airplane flights would be if the private firms who own the aircraft set a carbon tax on their own flights. However, this would be the responsibility of individual airliners and wouldn't guarantee a market-wide solution. If the government set a tax, then the airliners would be more likely to impose it on their flights for fear of consequences if they didn't. However, it is difficult for governments to impose taxes on airliners that don't operate in their own countries. For example, the British government would find it difficult to impose a tax on an airliner like Air China. If the airliner refused to pay, then the British government would have no means to enforce this tax. They could refuse Air China flights into the UK, but that would affect the tourism industry in the UK from the Chinese tourists. The government can also fund research into the use of cleaner technologies for airplane flights. Private firms are unlikely to be willing to fund this research themselves, as it will reduce their profits. The private firms aren't impacted by the externalities that the flights cause and are therefore not willing to pay to eliminate them. However, governments are impacted by the externalities. There are several health risks associated with flying, especially for older generations. This will impact the health industry, as more resources for medical care will need to be supplied to treat these people. Therefore, the government has the incentive to reduce the amount of airplane flights supplied. This will then reduce the market failure caused by the flights. Government policies are the best way to reduce market failure because they have the greatest incentive to reduce the amount of flights supplied. If it were up to the private firms, the chances of effective policies would rely on the morality of each airliner. Most private firms would only care about maximising their profits and as a result would not be willing to reduce the amount of airplane flights that they provided.